Hi folks, I'm Lee. I'm the retired book guy. I hope everybody's summer is going well. Mine's going great. I can't believe it's half over. It just goes so fast. Today I'm going to talk about my summer reading so far this year, 2026. I started off this summer reading a couple books on Pretty Boy Floyd. Pretty Boy Floyd, The Life and Times of Charles Arthur Floyd by Michael Wallace. And in tandem with that, I read The Life and Death of Pretty Boy Floyd by Jeffrey S. King. I read these two books in tandem, and then I made a video on the life and death of Pretty Boy Floyd. I'm going to put a link to it here. You can check out that video. I'll also put it down in the description where I go in detail on these two books. Both books are great. If you want a good picture of Pretty Boy Floyd, I recommend both of them. The book by Jeffrey S. King is a little more straightforward. If you just want the facts and kind of want a quick read, it's short. It's a little over 240 pages. If you just want a quick read, I recommend this one. If you want a more detailed book, I recommend this one by Michael Wallace. It's very detailed, as a matter of fact. It has a lot of the same information as the other book, but he goes very much in depth into his family, into the crimes that he committed. It's written a lot better. In the King book, it's a little more stilted. But if you want a better review of these two books, check out the link below for my Pretty Boy Floyd video. Another book that I read in June was a reread. It was The Terror by Dan Simmons. And I also did a video on this book. If you want to check that out, I'll put a link right here. And I'll put it in the description down below. This is one of my very favorite novels. It's a historical mystery with horror and supernatural mixed in. It's based on the 1845 Franklin expedition, which was an expedition to find the Northwest Passage. The British Navy sent two ships into the Arctic up through Canada to try to find the passage to the Far East. It's based on a true story. The expedition was lost, and nobody knew for 150 years or so exactly what happened to them. They just disappeared. So what Dan Simmons did was he crafted a story, a horror story around what happened to them. And there's a lot of facts in there too, what we know happened to them, and then the story that Dan Simmons attaches to it. It's a great novel. I really enjoyed this novel, and I highly recommend it. Again, if you want a more detailed description of it, look in the description. Check out my other video for it. And the next two books were both Kindle books that I read. The first one I got from another booktuber here on YouTube. I got the idea to read it from him. It's called One Deadly Eye by Randy Wayne White. It's from the Doc Ford series of novels, and he's a spy / operative based in Florida. So there's a lot of scenes in Florida. In fact, this novel is entirely in Florida. And I believe it's number 27 in the series. I'll be honest, I haven't read any Randy Wayne White books, let alone any Doc Ford novels before. And I normally don't like jumping into a series cold like that. But the booktuber that I watched said that you could do that easily. And he said it was a really good novel. And it was good. But because this is number 27 in the series, I felt like I was a little bit lost. But I still did enjoy it. I'd probably give it a 3.5-star rating, 3-star rating. Well, basically, there's a hurricane in Florida, and the descriptions of the hurricane and the devastation of the hurricane is described in detail, and those scenes are very good. The bad guys are really good, especially the lead bad guy. So if you want a fast-paced novel with some destruction in it and a really good bad guy and a lot of action, it's a good beach read. I recommend this. Am I going to read another one from this series? I don't know. If I did, I'd probably go back toward the beginning of the series, because a lot of things were mentioned in this one that were a little bit over my head, and I didn't quite get it. But I still did enjoy it. So that's One Deadly Eye by Randy Wayne White. And the last book that I just finished a couple days ago was George Washington, A Life by Ron Chernow, which won the Pulitzer Prize in 2011. And I started this book in early June. Again, it was another Kindle book. I started this book in early June, and it's a doorstop of a book. It's over 800 pages. I'm kind of glad I did read the Kindle, because it was a lot easier to lug my iPad around and read it in the Kindle app than to lug the 800-page book around. Great book. I read it because of the 250th anniversary this year, USA. Obviously, I knew of George Washington. I read other books about the American Revolution in that time period before. I never read a biography of George Washington, and this was really good. The book obviously begins with his early life, what he went through as a child. He had older half brothers and sisters, and then he had younger brothers and sisters also, of which he was the oldest one of that group. It showed how he resented the British. He wanted to serve in the military like his older half brother did. He wanted a commission to serve in the British Army, and he couldn't get it. The royal governor in Virginia would not let him have it. So he kind of resented the British for that. He resented how they did business with the colonies. And then, he finally did, because he was kind of opportunistic, he finally did get his chance to lead a Virginia militia. And then it talks about his run-ins with the French up in the Virginia territory, which is now West Virginia and Pennsylvania, and how this led into the French and Indian War, his exploits at Fort Necessity. All that's in there. Very interesting. Because of what happened there, he became known internationally. Then, because of his popularity, because of that, when the American Revolution did get started, he was given command of the Continental Army. And because of the leader that he was, he kind of brought out the best in his men. He didn't have a lot to work with. There wasn't a lot of money. The government was a little bit disjointed, and he had to do a lot with a little. And he managed to do it. He lost some battles, but learned a lot. He was forced to fight a defensive war a lot of the time, and it worked for him. And his popularity just grew and grew and grew. And then the book talks about how the French came in on the side of the fledgling United States, and victory was won at Yorktown. And it goes into a lot of detail. There are maps. It goes into a lot of detail on these specific battles. Not a lot. I mean, if you wanted to get more in depth with the battles, you probably have to look at a different book, but it does cover them. Great overview of those. And then it goes into George Washington being invited to the Constitutional Convention, where they drew up the U.S. Constitution after the Revolutionary War. And he was elected president of the convention. And then it's funny, as they're going through the Constitution, writing it out, he was the man that they looked to, sitting up above them there as the president of the convention. He was the man that they looked to as they drew up a description of what they wanted the first president to be. He kind of embodied that. And I thought that was very interesting. And he was very humble, very soft spoken, actually. He was slow to speak. He would listen to all sides and then he would speak. And there was great weight to his voice. He was like that throughout his life. He was like that at this convention. And then afterward, they held the election and he was elected the first president. His first term as president, he set a lot of standards. He had a great cabinet. He had Henry Knox as Secretary of War. He had Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State. And he had Alexander Hamilton as Secretary of the Treasury. And all three of them were brilliant, especially Jefferson and Hamilton. But then, as we go along into his first term, you start to see the squabbling between Jefferson and Hamilton. They were completely polar opposites politically. And kind of the first political parties were formed from those two cabinet members, from Hamilton and Jefferson. And and Washington tried to stay above the fray, but obviously he leaned a little more toward Hamilton's point of view. And then in his second term, the partisanship really came out. It was kind of anathema for anyone to say anything bad about Washington before his second term. Um, but it became commonplace, unfortunately. His political opponents, in fact, Washington ended up not speaking to Jefferson or Madison. His relationship with them was really splintered because of the partisanship that emerged in his second term. And then the book goes on after his second term, what he did later in life. He returned to Mount Vernon. And that's kind of where his heart was. The entire book was he was his heart was at Mount Vernon. Another thing that this book does is it shows a lot. It shows the dichotomy of Washington's views towards slavery uh, when he was around Hamilton and when he was in the North, which he was a lot uh, because the seat of the government was in. First, it was in New York, then it was in Philadelphia, and they started to build D.C. during his second term, but it wasn't complete. So he never really was in D.C. I mean, he oversaw some of the work that was being done, but so when he was in that part of the country, he wanted to do away with slavery. He There were a lot of people who were wanted to abolish it, especially in the North. Down south was a different story. And he was a Southern plantation owner and had slaves. He had slaves his entire life. His family had slaves. And Washington was a little preoccupied with money also. He was always trying to stay on top of his finances. And he looked at slavery, slaves as his property. And that was allowing him to make money. There was this dichotomy with how he felt about slavery. On one hand, he looked at it as a means to make money, although he did treat his slaves fairly well. He punished ones that he felt needed to be punished if they were slackers, but overall he treated them well. But on the other hand, he also saw the way the country was going, uh, and he wanted to abolish slavery. And in fact, in his will, he did free his slaves after he died. So Chernow talks about this at several points in the book, and I thought it was interesting. So that's another book that I read. Obviously, I talked about it for quite a bit there. I really enjoyed that book. I highly recommend it. It's You're going to invest some time in reading it though, but I really like that Chernow is an excellent writer, and it won the Pulitzer Prize. I don't know what else to say. So those are the books that I've read so far this summer. The books that I want to read um, before the end of summer. In fact, I've started two, And the first one is Six Frigates by Ian W. Toll. I'm only, maybe 40 pages into this so far. And it's a good segue to go from the biography of George Washington into this book, because it's the epic history of the founding of the U.S. Navy. And this happens during Washington's second term as president. We had a fairly large merchant navy, and there was a war being waged over in Europe. The Napoleonic Wars, well, first the Revolutionary Wars after the French Revolution, which morphed into the Napoleonic Wars. And we remained neutral during that conflict, although both sides wanted to draw us in, especially France, because they were our allies. But Washington was determined to keep us neutral. So we had a large merchant navy, and they sailed around the world, and they did trade with these countries who were at war. Off the African coast in the Mediterranean, there were these pirates, the Barbary pirates, and they were capturing ships, robbing them of their cargo, and enslaving the seamen. And this was happening to a lot of American ships. So this kind of pushed Washington and his cabinet into creating the Navy. And this is the story of the first six ships, including the USS Constitution, which is still a commissioned US Navy ship. It's in Boston. You can tour it. There's a museum there. In fact, I was there a couple years ago, pouring down rain though, unfortunately. So I got to see the museum. We weren't allowed to go on board the ship though, which was a bummer. But I did see it and got some great pictures of it, and the museum was outstanding. And so I'm really looking forward to reading this book. Like I said, it's a good segue to go from Washington to this, I feel. But even if you're not doing that, it's still a very interesting book to read, especially if you have an interest in the Navy or in this time period. Yeah, so that's Six Frigates by Ian W. Toll, just starting this one. The next book that I want to read, and I also started this, and it's going quickly, as a matter of fact. I'm over 100 pages in. I just bought this maybe a month and a half or so ago. It's The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, and I've heard a lot about this book. Haven't read it yet. Haven't read anything by Kristen Hanna. I know she's a prolific author, has a lot of fans. I know the rating on Goodreads for this book is through the roof, and so far it's living up to the billing. It's about two sisters after the Germans invade France in 1940, and they surrender. The French surrender, and now they're being occupied by German forces. And the two sisters, there's a big age gap. They're about 10 years apart in age, and the one sister has a husband who had been away fighting, and she doesn't know what's happened to him. And the other sister is very headstrong, hates the fact that they surrendered. And I'm really curious to see where the story's going to go from here. I know a lot of you have probably read this book. I hope I didn't spoil anything. I don't think so. I think you can read the back of this and kind of get what I just said. But so far, it's great. It's very fast paced. I read over 100 pages in 2 days. It's one of those books you can't really put down. So that's The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. And yeah, so, and the other books that I'd like to read this summer: Empire of the Summer Moon by S.C. Gwynn. It's about the Comanche in Texas, and I find the history of Texas fascinating. I know the Comanche raided there when the Spanish occupied that territory, and then they continued to raid after Texas broke away from Mexico, and even after Texas became a state, the Comanche were raiding. In fact, one of the maps in the front of the book, the dates are 1836 to 1875. So I'm assuming that that's the period that this book is going to cover. And the book says it's also about a pioneer woman, Cynthia Ann Parker, and her mixed blood son, Quanah, who became the last and greatest chief of the Comanches. So I'm really excited about reading this book. It's about 350 pages long, and if you've read this, let me know what you think of it. So that's one of the ones that I want to read. I also would like to read. I like international mysteries, international detective novels. I haven't read one for a while, and I've had this on my shelf for a while. So I'd like to read this. It's Bangkok 8 by John Burdett. I'm going to read the back just so you can get an idea what this one is about. In surreal Bangkok, city of temples and brothels, where Buddhist monks in saffron robes walk the same streets as world-class gangsters, a U.S. Marine sergeant is killed inside a locked Mercedes by a maddened python and a swarm of cobras. Two policemen, the only two in the city not on the take, arrive too late. Minutes later, only one is alive. That's all I'm going to read. From just that little bit that I just read, it sounds like a very interesting novel that I'm not going to be able to put down. So if you've read this, let me know what you think of it. I have the second book in this series too, so I'll probably read this and then read the second book shortly thereafter. But this is another read that I'd like to complete this summer. And the other one that I'll put down as a summer read, hopefully I get to it this summer. If not, I'll read it in the fall. And I know a lot of you have read this recently too. There were some group reads for it on some other booktube channels that I saw, and that's East of Eden by John Steinbeck. And I'll be honest, I don't know much about that novel. I've read Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. I haven't read much else by him. I know East of Eden was made into a movie that was very good, from what I understand. I know it's about two brothers. It's kind of a Cain and Abel story, I've heard. It takes place in California, and I think it's the early 1900s. And I know it's uh, a very good novel. I'm sure it's very well written. It's a classic, after all. So I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it. If you've read that, let me know what you think. And that's my summer reading so far and ahead. So let me know what you're reading this summer. What's the best book that you've read? Tell me a little bit about it. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Uh, and also tell me about your summer. Have you gone on vacation? Where have you gone? I'm getting ready to go to Ocean City coming up here um, for vacation. I'm going to be going to New York also in August for a wedding in the Albany area. So it's been a pleasure talking with you here today, and I will see you next time.